All right. We are back, and in true Matthew McConaughey style, we are swinging down to Texas for this week's episode. We've got Jake Corley from Digital Wildcatters here on the show. Wildcatters, I believe, is what it is, actually. Carlton, we're rolling with descriptive intros these days. Based on what you heard, how would you describe Jake? Remember, his entire career depends on how you describe him in the next 30 seconds.
Man, I tell you what, if there's one episode that you should never skip, it's this one, because Jake does a phenomenal job at a phenomenal pace. I mean, he's just clipping along, super interesting. His background, he's an ex-Marine, so the guy, I'm sure, is just tough as all get out. He's in the oil and gas industry, and they built a media company in this niche where essentially there's not a ton of other competition. But they've done it in such a way where they have been able to not only have an awesome podcast, but they've gone beyond advertising. They're now killing it with live events. They're doing some really interesting things in the software space. So if there's an episode you need to hear, don't tune out for this one.
Yeah, not a lot of competition, the industry that they're working in, as you mentioned, but a ton of money, which is a great mixture. Yeah, and we get into it with Jake, but you know what he saw as an industry veteran, and the pain that he felt of trying to understand what was going on in the industry, trying to understand the positives. You know, they're in everyone knows we're in an energy crisis. Everyone knows there has to be change that happens across the board in terms of making energy more accessible. And there's not many people from the industry itself discussing what they think needs to be done or how they're viewing the marketplace or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so what Jake and his team have done is built this media company. It started with a podcast, like you said, but have built an entire media company at this point to tell those stories and to tell them from the perspective of the industry, which is so important. When everyone else, there's voices all around. You know, it's like in sports these days. I don't know if Carlton, I know you're not a huge NBA guy, but there's a huge controversy going on right now because all of these NBA players are starting podcasts and are basically going direct to their fans and to their audiences with what they want to say, as opposed to going through like ESPN. And so ESPN's freaking out. All of their analysts are just trying to kind of bait these athletes and get into arguments with them. And the athletes don't care. They keep using the term new media about Draymond Green specifically is at the center of it because they don't need whoever, Stephen A. Smith, Skip Bayless, et cetera, talking head, filtering what they want to say and putting their spin on it and kind of letting things get lost in translation. They can speak directly to their fans. And that's exactly what Jake is doing for the energy industry. There's so much noise. There's so many talking heads. There's so many people with different opinions who are pumping their own bags in one way or another. And Jake is saying, and his company and his team are saying, here is what we as people who are in the industry have to say about any given issue. So super, super exciting. And like you said, a very successful company. Anything else stand out to you from the conversation?
Well, only thing I'll add to that is that a lot of that centers around authenticity. And you can tell that Jake authentically knows his wheelhouse and his industry extremely deep. And he not only talks about why they've been successful, but how they can grow and some of the opportunities that are still there.
Yeah. All right. Well, without further ado, let's dive in with Jake Corley of Digital Wildcatters. All right, we've got another episode here of Content is for Closers. On this episode, we're talking to Jake Corley from Digital Wildcatters, a.k.a. the One Hit Wonder. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
You specifically asked for no preparation, which I respect. That's how I do it as well. Most people request the opposite. So I have to hear for just off the jump, what's your philosophy on being off the cuff on shows?
I think it's raw. I think it's real. I think it's authentic, and I think that that's the kind of content that people demand these days. And I think that if you want to penetrate the hearts and the minds and get into the souls of people, especially this day and age, people are so scatterbrained. We're constantly fighting for attention. And I think that if you really want people to care about what you're producing, I think you need to be as real as possible. That's not to say that there's not a place for preparation. As we were kind of talking, prior to us hopping on here, we're doing this streaming conference. So a lot of like pre-production actually goes into thinking through how we produce some of these things. But I think for podcasting, I think that medium, I think it's better served if you're just off the cuff and you come in and you're just as real as possible, because people just want to be a fly on the wall. They want to kind of be voyeuristic into the kind of conversations that, people have. So that's my philosophy.
Agree. I think there's this bifurcation between, like, you can do all the prep work, and for what we're talking about, the prep work is your career. So, there's tons of background there. But if you are preparing specific for the execution you're about to do, it comes off as rote and rehearsed and all those things.
Yeah.
It's just a conversation, right? That people actually want to hear. So, we were having you on because of what you're doing with Digital Wildcatters. You're all over the world. We tried to do this last week. You were like in remote Costa Rica. Now I'm seeing tweets about Mexican beer. Like, what's going on? What is Digital Wildcatters? What are you guys doing? And how did this all come together?
Man, where does this even begin? I think that to start with kind of like the elevator pitch, Digital Wildcatters is the social network for the next generation of energy professionals. That is where we are today, and that's where we're heading, and that's kind of the trajectory of the company, is kind of being more of a content platform for the industry. And then we produce a significant amount of that content, but it's also, we empower the communities to create a lot of content, and then we help distribute that, really as more as a platform, right? But we started off as two guys in a closet, literally a storage closet at a co-working space, because they had no more space left. And they said, we'll give you this storage closet. We'll clean it out. We'll give it to you like $600 a month. We were like, sure, we'll take it. And just started podcasting. And so I had been in oil and gas at that point in my career, probably 5 years, I think. I came into the industry building tech companies for oil and gas. And then my partner kind of came from the field. He started roughnecking. He lived in Midland, Texas, which is the largest oil basin in the United States. And so he was roughnecking on oil rigs, and then kind of did some other stuff in the oilfield services space. So give me 1 second. I'm doing a podcast. Sorry, one of my people looked at it. So we started this podcast. We had a lot of friends who were founders in this space, and I had already been podcasting, kind of doing more of a news show in oil and gas, which was like the first one since 2016. We started Oil and Gas Startups podcast before it was even, Digital Wildcatters was even a thing in, say, 2018. And we literally just picked up the mics. We said, hey, let's have these conversations with people. Let's talk about, from more of like the entrepreneur perspective, like, what are you building? Why are you building what you're building? What is your journey? What is your story? And then where are you guys going? And I think that in the beginning, a lot of people said that was career suicide for us because of the way that we had built our brand. We weren't in suits and ties. We weren't like super buttoned up. We're dropping F-bombs left and right. And it was just us being us. Like, and if like, I came from the Marine Corps, so like, I'm just me. And then Colin came from being on the rig, and it's also, he's got a mouth on him as well. But I think that one of the things you had to commit to early on was that if we were going to, and we committed to putting out at least an episode a week for a year, let's try it, right? But if you're going to be on video or audio or whatever it may be for that amount of time, if you're trying to keep up some sort of like persona that is not real and authentic, then people are going to see through that. And so we rolled the dice and we said, hey, let's just be us and see where this goes. And it resonated. And I don't really think we realized in the beginning how much it resonated or how much impact it was having. And I think one thing that's really unique to us is that we've built really our community almost predominantly through LinkedIn. And I'd say probably maybe the last couple of years, we've kind of built up a nice little audience through Twitter, but it's predominantly this professionals crowd. And oil and gas apparently was just needing and wanting exactly what we were putting out there. And so literally everything that we've built since then has literally been off the back of this one podcast, two guys in a closet talking with their friends.
That's awesome.
And it's been an absolutely wild ride since.
So take us back. Cause I mean, so you had worked in technology, you'd worked around the industry, but this is a pretty different jump what you're doing now, and specifically because it hadn't been done before that I know of in this industry. So, and even taking a step further, we've had a couple other creators who are focusing on a blue collar industry. For instance, Freightwaves, Craig Fuller, Preston Holland, Timothy Dooner, all of them are doing a similar thing in the supply chain and trucking industry. But there have been people who have kind of created in that industry, not taking anything away from them. So where did this come from, the idea that like, yeah, we're going to do a podcast for oil and gas when that just really wasn't a thing at the time?
I think that Colin and I, one of the attributes that we have that I think has led to our success is I would see us as kind of like super networkers. We're constantly going out there, and I mean, my days are constant, just stacked full of meeting people, as with him, and that's how it's been for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And so we were naturally just trying to kind of build up our personal Rolodexes because we didn't know this was never intended to be a business. Okay. This was a side project, and we went into it with kind of that philosophy, and we said the worst case scenario is we walk away with some really good experiences, some really good connections. It's not going to hurt to kind of know more people in oil and gas, because at the time we were building tech for oil and gas companies. And so it would make it really, really easy to be able to either sell into them or help them integrate into some new technologies. Yeah. We also had ambitions of starting an oil and gas company, which we ended up doing. It ended up not being as grand as we kind of had anticipated, but at least we did it. So we looked at it as a worst case scenario. We walk away with something, a better network, right? And so from that perspective, I don't know, everything else was just upside, and we were able to go through and just meet some really, really good people. And going back to the genesis of like the thesis of the show, we had a lot of friends, or we were meeting a lot of people in Silicon Valley and in New York, particularly venture capitalists. It never hurts to have VC friends, particularly in the tech business, right? You're always raising more money, right? It never hurts to have those guys. And so we would tell people about all the things that were happening kind of in energy tech and oil and gas tech. And they said, great, where can we go to learn about it? And we said, there's no really place to send you. There's like nothing. There's you can Google these companies and you probably won't even find them. So we said, okay, let's start a podcast. And so we picked out our first 5 guests. We made kind of a wish list of people that we would love to have on the podcast. One of those being John Arnold, one of the richest and most successful guys in Houston, billionaire.
5?
Not one of our first 5. We actually got him we got him last year, but it took us 4 years of just networking and putting out content. And then all it took was one tweet. And we tweeted at John. He said, would love to be on the show. Would love to, he doesn't do podcasts. He doesn't do interviews. And 3 days later, he's in our office recording a podcast with us. So it's been absolutely surreal. I think that not only the business that we've been able to build off the back of, just a podcast, which our business looks a lot like Freightwaves. We know Craig, we know those guys. We've actually did a joint venture event together in the past. And so I think the only difference between us and them would be they have an actual data product, right, and we don't currently have a data product. We are more so positioning ourselves to be more of a social network for the next generation of energy professionals. Cool. So that's the biggest difference. But love those guys and love all the work that they're doing. Yeah,
they're great. I want to get more into the business side of things and the platform what you're talking about, but I have a couple of questions there on the story and the buildup. So I just had an argument on Twitter or LinkedIn somewhere with someone about who took issue with the fact that I said that advertising is one of the lazier ways to generate revenue via podcast, because you're overlooking, it's great, it can be part of the mix, but you're overlooking so many bigger picture things like what you all have done, like building this network up, all those sorts of things. Was that, I guess let me put it this way. Do you think that you would have the social network without having the podcast initially? Does that make sense to you?
No.
Yeah.
You have to have the community, and I think community is the greatest moat. And I think there is a difference between having an audience and having a community. And I think that the difference is we are making those in real life connections. I personally know, and Colin personally knows, and our team personally knows so many people in these communities, because at the same time, around the same time we launched the podcast, actually before we launched the podcast, we were doing these kind of oil and gas happy hours at our office. We were one of the first people to to get an office at the WeWork when the first location opened in Houston. And so we had access to the common areas and there was nobody else there, which was wonderful. So the very first one we ever did, we said, hey, we're doing, just a kind of casual get together. We'd already been putting out content on LinkedIn, just kind of like posting and kind of getting some notoriety. And the first one, we had like 300 people show up. We were like, well, this is cool. And we had like just kegs of beer, like literally just kegs of beer in trash cans. We had pizzas that Colin and I both picked up ourselves. We forgot to get plates and it was a hit. And we were like, cool, like, let's just see where this goes. And so by that, it was literally like, community is not something you can buy. You have to literally build it brick by brick. And it's been 5 years of us building this. And many of those years, we never had a single ask. We've always tried to deliver disproportionately more value to the community than we extract. And I think that is one of the biggest keys. And so it's constantly helping people find jobs. It's constantly introducing them to capital providers. It's making all sorts of connections. It's, when somebody gets laid off, hearing them, come to you and how can we help, and just constantly trying to be a resource and doing that day in and day out for years, even when you're making absolutely no money and just doing it because it's the right thing to do. That's how you build up a really, really good community. And so as a result, once you have that community, there's a lot of really amazing things that you can do that you can build on the back of that community. One of the most common things that you see is people build up, kind of an audience on Twitter, particularly around like tech or VC stuff. And then they start like a rolling fund, right? And they just kind of make themselves, hey, now I'm a VC and I'm constantly just taking in more money and I'm just kind of making placements and things. You see that with like, what's his name? Harry Stebbings, 20-minute VC. You see that with a couple different other people. But there's so many things that you can just bolt on. And love to go. I'm happy to go into all the different ways that we've done it. Advertising was the first and obvious thing that we went to. It was one of those things we were like, okay, once we actually, so in 2020, we left everything else that we were doing. We either sold it or just left it or just killed it off, whatever it was. And we said, we're going to go all in. And we had enough seed capital from that to get us through 2020. Thankfully, because we made this decision right before COVID hit, right before oil prices went negative. And we had to figure this out. We didn't know media. We were just guys who were like putting out content, but we like had this conviction that there was something here. And so, yeah, it was just like podcast advertising. But at that time, we'd already been doing a podcast for 2 years with no advertising, no nothing. We had never monetized anything. And so whenever I talk to creators today and they're like, they're talking about launching a podcast and they're automatically bringing up monetizing. I said, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Go out there, earn it, see if you even get market fit first. Do this for 2 years and then kind of think about, monetizing something. You have to earn that. So, and since then it's evolved. Advertising is still a huge part of my business. It's not the biggest part. There's a lot of other parts that are actually a much larger part of the business. I think with us positioning ourselves as more of a platform, and especially the new platform that we are building, I think the self-serve ads platform, very similar to what you see in Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, things like that, but more geared to this industry, I think is going to be a huge moneymaker.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. So you said that you're still continuing to create content yourselves. Obviously, that'll probably always be an engine that you power. But you're empowering other folks in the industry to create content as well. What does that mean? How are you doing that practically?
So it started off as us starting what we call Wildcatters Studios. And so very similar to Industry Dive has their, I think it's creator ID, and they do stuff with like white papers and things like that. We take a little bit of a different approach. We had so many people reach out saying, hey, we would love to, like, we don't know what to do. Like nobody in this industry, like we're literally the only ones doing it. And we have no competition in this space whatsoever. And so people come to us and they're like, yeah, we would love to create content. We just don't even know where to begin. And so we see Wildcatter Studios as content as a service. But we do it in a way where it integrates with our brand. It's not like us like completely selling our soul to do something. At the end of the day, if they enter into an agreement with us, I have kind of more quote unquote editorial control to say whether this is good content or not. And if it's not good content and I don't think it's good content, then we won't release it regardless of how much money.
But so you're actually producing the content on behalf of company X.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And so that could be anything along the lines of what I would consider to be more like a YouTube video essay. It could be something as we did a deal with an investment bank. And so that investment bank has an entire research arm and a huge research team. And so they were able to give us a ton of research. They wanted to be So they came to us and they said, we want to be cool. And we also want to be kind of the leaders in this energy tech space. And we said, you guys are cool and you have the audience and you have the distribution. How do we align with your audience? And we said, okay, so they gave us, I think we did 5 videos at first. And we picked 5 different topics, and the research team went out and did all the research for us. So we didn't have to go through and do any of the fact checking or any of that kind of stuff. These guys are like the best at what they do. And so we took that, and then I took it and we made a script, and then we storyboarded it up, and our editor was able to put it together into something that was amazing. And so that was like how oil and gas is fighting climate change. And so there was a ton of things in there. It was talking about geothermal technology, which is still new, but it has a lot of potential. And then we went through like EVs and batteries and like where you get the raw materials at and the implications of most of that coming from China and things like that.
First of all, one engagement. What a brief, like make us cool. I love that. We need more people. We need more people doing that.
Yeah.
So then when that happens, you create this piece of editorial. Are you then publishing it to your audience, or are you built, okay, so it's going on your network, and then I assume, they can also publish it to their channels or whatever.
Yeah, it's the half of the benefit is that we have built-in distribution, because you can see a lot of these companies will go out and hire a video production firm or whoever it may be, or PR firm, and they're paying a ridiculous amount of money, and then they drop it on their YouTube. And the problem is that they haven't spent any amount of time growing that YouTube, and so it gets no reach. You get like 100 views. We did with the largest natural gas producer in the United States, EQT Corporation. We actually did a short documentary, 15 minutes. But it kind of came about very serendipitously. We're friends with the CEO. I was riding in his truck in Pennsylvania. He wanted to introduce me to this farmer who had roboticized his entire farm. And the way that he was able to do that was taking royalties from their deal. So the oil and gas company came in, leased the land to be able to drill oil and gas wells. When they did that, they wrote $240 million worth of checks to 850 landowners. And then there was ongoing royalties from the production of oil and gas, predominantly gas. So we did a documentary about that. And so it wasn't about EQT. It wasn't about, oorah, these guys. They're already the biggest. Nobody cares. It was about natural gas and telling that story. And so since we've done that, that was the most highest quality piece of content we've ever done. Now we have a couple different more documentaries that we're doing across the industry and across the world, really. We're going to Asia, we're going to Africa. We're going to document kind of this energy transition from like wood and dung to coal, from coal to natural gas, from natural gas to whatever's next, right? So there's a million different things that kind of fall into this Wildcatters Studios kind of bucket, but it's my litmus test is as long as it's good content, as long as it doesn't seem like we're selling our soul, then it's something that's interesting for us. We have a show that we're doing actually, kind of our first like TV show. It's not going on TV, it's going on YouTube, but it's the first time that anybody's really documented like the behind the scenes of like $1 billion oil and gas company. And so they gave us unparalleled access. And the coolest thing about all this was the CEO came to us and said, I want to do this. That was the coolest thing. It wasn't me pitching him on this. He said, hey, he actually went to Gary V's, was it like VaynerCon or VCon or whatever it was, and was super stoked at NFTs and the metaverse and all this kind of stuff. And he wants to position his company as more of like this, for lack of a better term, more of like a meme stock, kind of like Tesla, right? Because we've seen this transition from moving from like value investing to like emotional investing. And if you're able to create this content and build this relationship essentially with this audience, with this community, hopefully you'll trade
Which
it.
Which is crazy, but true. Yeah.
Right? So it's interesting. I call that the decommoditization of the commodities, because I feel like so many companies are doing the same things. And the only way that you can really differentiate yourself is through putting out this content, and that's something that I continuously preach. And everybody thinks that, why are you guys wanting more people to create content in this space? Wouldn't they just compete with you? And I said, we welcome it. We need it as an industry. We need it because the industry that powers the entire world, that is the single biggest factor differentiating between a first world country and a third world country, is being demonized for all the wonderful things that we do for the world. And the reason is because it's not my generation necessarily, but it's the people who came before us who just were silent. They didn't say anything. And everybody was like, well, it's not my responsibility. So we looked to the Shells and the Chevrons and the Exxon Mobils and the American Petroleum Institute and said, you guys create some content. And the content they created was propaganda, and it was very disingenuous. And there was already a lot of trust issues with the industry. And so our approach, we're hoping to combat all of that. And now with social media, you've democratized and decentralized the content creation. So everybody needs to be putting out content about just documenting what you're doing, like your day to day. Like the oil and gas industry is amazing because the longer you're in it, the more you realize you don't know anything. And so it's one of those things where you can constantly learn more and more and more. Oil and gas itself is split up into upstream, midstream, and downstream, which is 3 entirely different industries. Then you have the entire services sector that services each one of those. It's so complicated. We're like drilling miles into the earth to pull out resources that none of us can see.
And it is so historically silent. Last year, for some reason, went on I read I can't remember what it's called now. John D. Rockefeller's biography, whatever that's called, and Titan, I think, and then the Koch brothers, Sons of Wichita, which were both like, I think they're somehow tangentially related to the oil and gas industry. And it was crazy to me that these are like both, you know, historic families that have done so much. And like you said, they are, the industry is demonized and no one says anything. It's pretty crazy. So you all have come in as this voice for the industry, but also to the industry. And so I'd be curious, like, especially starting out, what did you find promotion wise that helped you get some inertia, helped you get some quick wins? Or, I mean, you don't just build an audience that you can activate and have, I know you kind of said it off the cuff, but even having 300 people come to a pizza social or whatever is like a ton of people for starting off. So what did you find that you were doing, even if it was unscalable initially and now you don't do it anymore, that helped you get that momentum?
Constantly putting out content day in and day out and just making posts and speaking our truth. And I think that I think we've been doing a lot more of what I would consider to call preaching lately. And I think that's just because just the phase of the business that we're in and the challenges that the industry is currently facing, particularly with Russia and a lot of the other like geopolitical stuff. And so I feel like I've been doing a lot more speaking at different conferences and we've just kind of been preaching. But if I'm going back to the early days, that's a lot of what we were doing. It was constantly us putting our opinion out there of like all the things that we hated about the industry and all the things that could be better. And the single, I guess, kind of thread for us, even as we continue to grow and expand into broader energy and expand beyond oil and gas, our mantra is evolve or die. And I think that what we've been so combative against is this mindset that things aren't broke, so why fix them? But the problem is that there's been so many things that have been broken in oil and gas for so long that let's break the entire thing and rebuild it from the ground up. And through that and through this whole evolve or die mantra, we created this tribe. We created this tribe of people who wanted to challenge the status quo, who wanted more from the industry, wanted more from themselves, and just didn't feel like the industry was living up to its potential. And so I think that kind of attitude, I think, is really what in the early days, I think, drew people to our post on LinkedIn and really caused a lot of this engagement. And so then whenever we did do these events and when we did launch the podcast, I think it was just more.
So you talked about evolution there. Fire. I mean, now you're evolving even past that. You're doing live events, you're doing streaming events. And you were telling me off air about how you're creating and producing these very high end streaming events. What are those about? How are you doing those? How are you getting people to attend those? Like, give us a little bit of the behind the curtain on that.
Yeah, so we actually did our first one in conjunction with FreightWaves in early 2021. It was, right smack dab in the middle of COVID. We knew like live events were a big part of our business. We've been doing our series that we call Energy Tech Night. And so we have companies come out. We do it at it's an old 100-year-old movie theater. So there's just a single movie theater. It's got a huge screen. It's got a balcony. Actually, like churches have services and stuff there too. And so companies come, they present their technology, they pull up like a demo of their software. We usually have somewhere between 300 to 500 people that show up. We have like food and drinks and stuff. And so we couldn't do that anymore. And it was like, well, how do we continue to build this community brick by brick? And we had met Craig and the team of FreightWaves, and they were like, hey, let's do one of these streaming events with us. And so we did that. And early on, I was like, well, this is interesting. I just didn't want to do it like a Zoom call. I said, if we're going to do this, I want to do something that nobody's ever done before. And I'm kind of demanding more out of myself. And so we pre-recorded all of that content and then we emceed it live. Like I was telling you, it's very similar to the Chappelle Show, minus the live audience. You know, you come out, you know, you give your monologue, you talk, you give some commentary or whatever it may be, and then the production guy presses play and you move into something. And at the same time, you've got a chat that's going so people can continue to chat throughout. Oh, this is amazing. Oh, I hate this, whatever it may be. So we had like 1,200 people on that. And I was like, well, this is interesting. We didn't charge anything for admission. I don't think you should for any of the streaming events. We made all of our money on sponsorship. It's kind of more like a pay to play thing. But like I was telling you, the reason we're able to kind of command, I guess, the sponsorship tiers that we are was because now the companies are able to walk away with an asset. You know, so it's not just, hey, you have the impact of this event, but this can continue to live on our website and our YouTube, and you guys can take it and build marketing campaigns around it to where this is the gift that keeps on giving. You'll have people reaching out to you for 1, 2, 3 years from now. And so with the one that we're doing now, I was having lots of conversations with different founders in the space, and there seemed to be a lot of hype in the emissions technology space within oil and gas. And so we created this Zero conference, not net zero, to talk about what the industry has been doing, is doing, and will be doing to lower our emissions to zero, right? And so there's been a ton of money that's been invested in the space. There's a lot of different technology companies. There hasn't been a single kind of conference focused on that. And so me putting on kind of my operator hat and thinking like they do, I said, if I was trying to build like an emissions program as an oil and gas operator, I wouldn't know where to start. And so there's so many different things that we have to kind of go through. So we're giving a primer of kind of the industry. We're giving a primer of all the different kind of technologies. I mean, a lot of companies that are going to come present, and just very similar to how we do it at Energy Tech Night, except it's just going to be on video. And then we also have people that are going to come and just kind of do some interviews. And then we have a significant amount of panels talking through a lot of the hot topics in this space. And so it's a fun way, especially like obviously we're out of COVID now. We can do live events. We actually just did one a month and a half ago. We had 1,200 people at the Eighth Wonder Brewery here in Houston at the intersection of energy and Bitcoin mining. So it was huge. It was great. So why do we do Zero streaming? And I think that was for 2 reasons. For one, it allows us to be able to test a thesis of an event without going and spending $500,000 on a venue, right? And so I can test this year 1, and then year 2, I can go out and say, hey, we had a really good response. Now I can justify us being able to pony up cash to be able to do something in person. So I think that that's likely to happen next year. 2, it goes back to the industry not being able to, like, industry does not talk about all the good things that we do. And so I wanted to create just a ton of content all at once so that we can put this out there for the industry and for the world. And so it's still even challenging. There's a lot of conversations, a lot of companies that wanted to participate that still don't have a cohesive strategy or maybe an alignment within the C-suite of like, hey, we're investing a lot of money into this, but we really don't know what we want to say publicly. We don't know what that strategy should be, which I think is part of the problem. So it's partially like internal activism. It's partially like external activism. But at the same time, it's just being a little bit financially responsible.
If you can test it, why wouldn't you?
Something. If it falls flat, then cool, we move on. Like, and there's outside of our internal production costs, which are already sunk costs for us because they're all full-time.
Right.
It's all upside.
I love it. I love everything you guys are doing. I love how you're focusing on the niche of oil and gas, which is obviously where you come from, but just another overlooked industry that has so much potential. And you know, we talk a lot about, we always use the landscaping example on the show. But for those of you who are listening, who are in landscaping, who are in HVAC, who are in just literally anything but tech, VC, and content, which is what most people think towards, this is yet another example of what the upside could be for you as you're creating in your niche. Jake, I really appreciate you coming on, explaining your story, explaining how you all work. Before we let you go, 2 questions. The first is just, what is if you had to say one single thing that's on the horizon, could be trend-wise, content-wise, could be the live event, whatever, that just has you excited, what is it? And then let us know where people can follow along as well.
You talking about for us or just macro content?
Just something that you have your eye on in terms of the way content is heading and like something that you might be able to take advantage of.
Ooh, I think for us, I think I'll just kind of speak to what's kind of top of mind. You know, with us launching our Collide platform, which will be like the social network. We're not going to call it Digital Wildcatters because we want to keep that top of funnel media, all that kind of stuff. It's super interesting for us. And especially since we're going to launch that in the next month, we actually did it. We actually white labeled once again. It was like, we got quotes to build an app from scratch that were like $2 million up front, like $250,000 a month to maintain it. And so we white labeled something that was already out there. Awesome. It got us like 60% of the way there. And we never talked about it. We put it on our website. So if you wanted to go, you can, if you want to just explore. Wow. So we had 1,000 beta users on that. And we had it for a year, and we were able to get feedback on that of what they liked, what they didn't like. And we just never promoted it, never once. And through that, we hired ourselves a product manager, and then we built it completely from scratch, but using low code, no code through Bubble. And then we hired the top kind of Bubble consultants. This whole app all in cost us less than $30,000
that you were quoted.
Right. And it's an entire, like, yeah, it's absolutely wild. So I'm excited about that because it really helps us get escape velocity on creating products in the same way that FreightWaves does with their Sonar product, right? And so they are able to now create a lot of content, right? And not all that content necessarily needs to be monetized, but they're able to get a negative customer acquisition cost through the content as people are converting to using Sonar, which is absolutely brilliant. And so for us, being able to grow Collide and actually be proud of something and launch that, and then build in like a self-serve advertising platform, and build in, like, one of the biggest problems in this industry right now is that nobody can find qualified talent. Lots of people apply to LinkedIn postings. Lots of people apply to Indeed postings, but they're not qualified for the jobs. And that's because there's never really been like this centralized hub. And so Collide for us will literally be like the front page, the homepage, the centralized hub for the entire energy industry. So when you land there, you can search, people, you can search jobs, you can post jobs, you can find all the events, not just our events, find all of the content there, and everything will just be indexed.
That alone is a
wonderful business. Place where you can go explore the entire energy industry. Yeah. And that's the idea. Right. And so, and there's a lot of comps. There's been people who've come into the space and attempted it a decade ago, and they were too early. And it ended up fizzling out. Plus there was some FBI investigation, some fraud stuff. So whatever. But yeah, it's like I said, it comes back to community, and it comes back to, there's just so many things that we can continue to build off the back of that. Masterclasses. So we have access to the best and the brightest people in the industry. One of the guys that works with us ran one of the private equity shops in this space, and he's absolutely brilliant. But if you wanted like him to teach energy private equity, we could do a masterclass for that, right? Nobody else would get access to that. You can't learn that in school, and we can do that and replicate that many, many, many times over. But also democratization. There are trade groups, as in with a lot of your listeners, there's probably trade organizations in every single one of these verticals. And so we have the Society of Petroleum Engineers, which is arguably the largest. Society of Petroleum Engineers members will write white papers, research papers, and then Society of Engineers will turn around and sell it for $1,000, and they don't get a cut of it. And so we could do not necessarily these white papers. I don't think it really fits what we do, but we can democratize that to where we can take that, convert it into some sort of content network where creators can get paid for that. So the ideas are endless, and because we're not relying on a single source of revenue, we can experiment with things in the same way that Facebook and Google do. If it doesn't work, we kill it. But ultimately, it all comes down to just having this community, and community is top of mind over absolutely everything that we do. We do a lot of things that make absolutely no money. But it's just an investment into the community.
I love it, man. I love seeing all the energy, all the ideas that you have behind you. Obviously, we'll all stay tuned and keep tabs on what you're building with Digital Wildcatters and Collide. If people want to keep tabs on that stuff, what's the best place for them to check you out?
DigitalWildcatters.com. We're all over social media. You can look for me, Jake Corley, on LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever else. And then my partner, Colin McLeod. You can find
all of those things in the show notes below. Appreciate you coming on, Jake, and we'll have to stay connected and catch up again for sure soon.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate it.